Welcome to 49ers After Dark. We're your hosts, Grant Cohn, Jessie, Naylor. Very serious time talking about football tonight. How you doing, Jessie? Good to see you.
Hey, fantastic to see you. Nothing more serious than talking about football on a Wednesday after dark, at least on the East Coast.
This is oh so serious. I'm never going to crack a smile the entire show. In fact, I'm going to be like Pat McAfee and stand up and yell the whole time.
The whole time.
What's he yelling about?
I don't know.
Worked up, but then you listen to him and it's like, man, you haven't said anything at any point. Sorry, maybe I'm just biased, but I wanted to like him because everyone watches the show, and then I'd be like, man, you haven't said anything. But he yelled it loud anyway.
He's funny. I think that's it. He's just a character, and he's gotten into the whole wrestling thing. I think that's like his shtick right now is like this whole wrestling deal he's got going. So I don't know.
Yeah, he is kind of funny. All right, so the Niners are starting to do things because camp opens in exactly a week, and there are still a lot of free agents and holes in his roster. So, according to reports, the 49ers are going to sign defensive tackle Robert Nkemdiche. Jessie, what do you think?
God, I got to be real. I don't know a lot about him other than he was a first round pick, I believe, of the Seahawks in 2016, 26 overall, something like that. I mean, he can't be that great if he's still out there, right, as a free agent. But I will say this. The 49ers are really funny to me because they will say things where they show the utmost confidence in certain people, but their actions say something different. Mm-hmm. All offseason, all we've heard is how confident they are in Kinlaw.
Yep.
Rehab's going good. We're watching him out the windows. He's looking great.
Yeah.
But then when they are right about to start training camp, they've got 15 defensive linemen on this team, something crazy like that. And you go sign another defensive tackle. Why? Yeah, why?
He plays the same position as the guy you just mentioned.
Now, I mean, maybe that goes back to our conversation about D Ford. Maybe it's more so about that. They're going to let D Ford go now that he's able to pass a physical. I don't know. They do, but maybe they feel like they're thin inside.
Maybe they need a camp body because maybe the guy you mentioned won't necessarily be out there for every single snap with the first team. Maybe they'll need to go easy on him, or maybe he won't be ready right away, or who knows? That's the first thing that went in my mind. A camp body at best. At worst, it's they need him because guy started 6 games in his career. He was a first-round pick for the Cardinals. He did play for Seattle last year. He was the number 1 recruit in the nation coming out of high school in 2013. But he's been a real disappointment. I guess give him to Chris Kosar, see what happens. Not really sure the guy's going to make the team, but as you pointed out, it's kind of interesting that he plays Kinlaw's position. More than kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you have to raise an eyebrow at it, right? Yeah. You're bringing in a guy who was a first-round talent.
Yeah.
You said the number 1 recruit in 2013. I mean, this is a guy who has a lot of talent that hasn't been reached. The potential hasn't been reached in the NFL. Chris Kosar said he'd get the best out of everybody. We know that already. We've seen it 1,000 times over. So with that being said,
he's still only 27.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like he's old. So it's an interesting move to say the least. And again, maybe they feel like they have a lot of depth on the edge, which I can agree with actually. And so instead of replacing D Ford with another defensive end, well, you can do it with an interior lineman as a camp body and just see what happens. But I do have to question what's going on with Kinlaw. Is he really as healthy? Because we were told this last year as well, right? He's healthy. He's ready. He was, in practices a little bit, then sitting out of practices. His knee swelled up on the flight over to training. Just a bunch of weird things. So the hope is that he's healthy. He can get his career on track, and that everything that they've been telling us about him is accurate, and he's ready to go. Because they got to figure out if he is or if he isn't at this point.
But it does feel like they just invested in a Javon Kinlaw insurance policy, like the week before camp started. So not a great sign, although we'll have to see. One more player the Niners are rumored to be interested in and may sign soon. Free agent center Billy Price. He was a first-round pick in 2018, I believe, Cincinnati. They couldn't stand him for some reason. He lost his starting job. They moved him to guard. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. They traded him for peanuts. Started 15 games last year for the Giants. I guess, was decent enough to keep the job, but the Giants instantly replaced him. New coaching staff. They brought in John Feliciano. So he's out there, and it seems like he's probably really cheap and young, or maybe some athletic upside. What do you think?
I think exactly what I thought about the other signing, right? If they do sign Price, again, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And you can't sit here and say that you've got the utmost confidence in somebody like Brindle,
right,
and then bring in a guy that plays his position, a guy that could potentially be a starter and has been a starter quite a bit in this league, especially when you compare it to Brindle for the age and how many games that they've started. So if they bring in Price, that tells me they're not very confident in Brindle, and that would be two players potentially that they've sold us tickets on. When you were a kid, we used to call it wolf tickets, right?
Mhm.
They've sold us wolf tickets on potentially two players this offseason, and fans ate it up the way that they always do. And maybe they're not as sold on some of these guys. So we'll see.
Now, I do think that Price probably will be a little bit more expensive than Nkemdiche. I mean, he started 15 games last year. So what would be nice about Price is that he, he started 15 games at center last year, as opposed to Brendel, who played 6 snaps the last 3 years. Like, at least he's a starting center. And I looked up on Pro Football Focus, Assist Data Hub, these grading services. They both kind of agree that he's, around like the 20th best center in the league, something like below, not I would say below average, but a starting center, but like the bottom half of the league.
He's the Jimmy Garoppolo of centers. Is that what you're telling me?
He's an upgrade over Brendel, but he's a major downgrade from Mac. The Assist Data Hub had him as the 3rd best center in the league last year. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's not Billy Price. So it's going to be a big downgrade one way or another, unless the Niners maybe get Jessie Tretter and he's healthy. Corey Wiggs says if this team doesn't sign Jessie Tretter, it's a disappointment. Yeah, I think Billy Price would be a bit of a disappointment, although he would be an upgrade over. I mean, he's worse than Daniel Brunskill. I'll put it that way. Brunskill's a better player than Billy Price.
Yeah, probably. But I'll say this. I mean, at the same time, we've kind of clamored for them to go sign somebody on the interior offensive line.
Better than nothing.
So it's better than nothing, right? I'm with you. I prefer Tretter. Here's the problem with Tretter. Well, the problem is Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the team. So anytime he's here, you're not going to be able to sign Tretter. That's one. Two, JC Tretter, I believe, is the lead of the players union.
That's true.
Like he's the head guy. So if you think he's going to come in at like bare bargain price on a 1-year prove it deal, no. You can't do that when you are the head of the players union. You have to go in and get your money. Like you have to set a tone. And going in and taking little money or an incentive laden deal for a guy that's as talented as he is, whether he practices or not, that's not setting the tone that the players union would ever want. So that's an interesting thing that they've got to navigate through if they sign JC Tretter.
Also, he wrote an article, a column for the NFLPA website this offseason saying that Deshaun Watson's contract was great for players, and that players and agents should all be pushing for fully guaranteed contracts. So that's where he's coming from. If you want to get JC Tretter, you probably got to show him the money, and the Niners could and should, but they are looking at Billy Price instead. At least you know who Billy Price is.
Right. Yep.
Juice Man Jeremy says it's July 20th and Jimmy Garoppolo and Dee Ford are still on the roster. Hard to fathom. Who goes first?
I think we had the conversation last week. I'm sticking with Ford somehow makes this team if he can pass a physical. I don't know why. I'm just going with it. Oh, gosh. And Debo doesn't get re-signed.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay. So let's move on to the news of the day. First off, this is from Mary Kay Cabot in Cleveland, who is more plugged in than anyone with that team. And she says the Browns are not expected to pursue Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade, that they're just not interested. Now, I'm sure a bunch of teams would sort of swoop in like vultures if he were released, because I don't think you could get very much money on the open market. But in a trade, according to Mary Kay Cabot, Browns not interested, which is interesting to me because out here on the West Coast, we were all assuming they would be. But I guess she's assuming that, I don't know, not going to be a full. Basically, she said under no circumstances are the Browns trading for Jimmy Garoppolo. Wow, that's interesting. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that tells you that Watson's not going to get suspended for, probably 8 games or less potentially, right? And so I think the whole premise of Jimmy Garoppolo going to Cleveland was twofold. One, Watson gets suspended all year. if that's not going to happen, then that ruins that. And two, they were the one team after Baker got traded to Carolina that could take on his whole contract. Well, I mean, that doesn't really fit the mold anymore. And so, yeah, if Cleveland's not in, where does that leave Jimmy? Right? Like we keep saying once this ball drops, this. I mean, we've been saying this since March. Well, once Wentz, once Trubisky, once Watson, once Baker. There's no market for Jimmy. There's just not a market to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. There can't be at this point. So I just think that it's just another team that's out of the mix, and at this point, we really shouldn't be surprised.
I just think it's really funny on the day that Adam Schefter breaks the news that Don Yee is now allowed to start seeking a trade. You got the Cleveland delegation being like, "Yeah, we're good. We're good." I know everyone's looking at us. I know everyone's looking at us right now. Nope, not going to happen. I think that's really funny. Also, the way that Adam Schefter phrased it, they're allowed to start seeking a trade like they weren't allowed last week. They weren't allowed 3 months ago. I mean, the phrasing of it was very pro Jimmy. It was like, now that he can start. Now the Niners are finally taking the shackles off. And he's been cleared to practice. But he probably won't because the Niners are going to be cautious. They're going to be cautious. But Jimmy is a hero and an inspiration. And he's cleared. It's like, but he's not going to practice. He won't be practicing? Okay. All right.
Do we have this as a separate topic? Because if we don't, I'll go in on it now. But if we do, then go. Okay. All right. Here's the deal with that. So this to me tells me that the 49ers are setting up to do exactly what we've talked about in cutting Jimmy and saying it's what's best for him. Right. And here's how you parlay this into that whole situation. We gave him the opportunity to seek a trade. We didn't find a trade that made sense for Jimmy Garoppolo and our team. And so we're going to do right by Jimmy Garoppolo. But even though he's been out there and has been willing to negotiate a contract, which we knew months ago, even though we know that they've been able to seek a trade, this is nothing crazy new. This is them hedging their bets. If he doesn't get traded, then we can play that ticket. And it's also them hedging their bets and saying, hey, we will hang on to him up until the very, very last minute by taking it careful with him. And we can use he's still rehabbing. That's why he's not around the team as an excuse. They played this very well both ways. They've given themselves an out on either side to this point. So if Jimmy doesn't show up to training camp, well, I mean, it was reported that he wasn't going to show up to training camp. We're taking it easy. He's rehabbing. And if they cut Jimmy, they've already laid the groundwork for that. Very, very genius work here by John Lynch. I like what he did with this one.
But so the question is, will Jimmy Garoppolo find a trade partner before the season starts? I don't think anyone expects that that's going to happen. No.
Not at this point. I mean, there are more teams involved, potentially involved now than there was a month ago. But even out of those potential involvements, at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for any team to take on Jimmy Garoppolo and pay that full amount when he's got to get cut. And then he's out there to be had anyways. So why? Like no team's desperate enough for a starting quarterback that is going to compete this year. Mm-hmm. Cleveland was the one team that fit that mold if Watson was unable to play for the whole year. But we're hearing as low as 2 games at this point, which is crazy, but that's what we're hearing. So why?
Here's the thing, though. You think the Niners are going to do the right thing and that they want to cut Jimmy and they're just looking for an excuse and that Jimmy's going to ask for the release, as Steve Young suggested, and that the Niners are going to be like, yes, he asked for the release. First of all, I'm skeptical in a couple of ways. You're telling me Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't want to make $27 million this year? That's the first thing. I mean, I'd like to make $27 million. And if he asks for release, he ain't making anywhere near that on the open market. What's the other thing I wanted to say? My wife just walked up. It's her fault. I'm distracted. No. Okay. The other thing. No, this is the main point. If the Niners keep him, they can trade him midseason. And, every week that goes by, he'd be cheaper for the upcoming team. They could do that. And if they don't trade him, because they're never going to trade him, they could get the 3rd round comp pick for him next year. So would they, out of the kindness of their hearts, cut him and walk away from a 3rd-round comp pick, you know how much they love comp picks. I haven't seen a team as addicted to comp picks as the Niners love comp picks more than anyone else. That's what I keep coming back to. They could be like, oh, you want us to cut you? Well, maybe you should have told us you were going to have this shoulder surgery because we didn't know. And we were like this close to getting a good offer for you, something better than a comp pick. You spring this on us, and now you want us to like do the right thing and cut you? Like, no, we'll let you sit here and be embarrassed all year and then take the 3rd-round comp pick and blame it on you. I feel like that's on the table, man. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm cynical like that.
You and I'm a fan. So this is why this show is great, because we're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum when the way that we view this team in a lot of areas. This is one of them. Okay, sure, they can get a 3rd-round comp pick, but they're doing 2 things. First of all, they're saying a 3rd-round comp pick, which is essentially a 4th-round pick. 3rd-round comp pick is worth more than $25 extra million next year. That's one thing they're telling you. And 2, that Jed York is willing to pay that this season to get a 3rd-round comp pick. What I like about what they're doing is that they know that Jimmy can't be traded, right? And so by laying this groundwork the way that they have right here, we keep talking about, well, if you keep Jimmy, and you just said it, maybe another team gets desperate. Maybe another team has their quarterback go down, and then they need Jimmy Garoppolo. Mm-hmm. But what if that team that has their quarterback go down is the 49ers, and they got rid of Jimmy Garoppolo? Versus if you hold him until the very bitter last second, you make sure that Trey Lance comes out of this thing healthy. Mm-hmm. You don't need Jimmy Garoppolo, and then you let him walk. You don't pay him. You save that extra $25 million to roll over to next year to double up. Jed York doesn't have to pay that money. You have money that's freed up in case you start 6-1, 5-2, and you feel great about this thing to where you can go make a bold move and bring in a player that can help you win a championship. And Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to play as a starter this year. It's too late. Like, you win all the way around. To me, if the 49ers pass up that opportunity, that would be crazy. That would be crazy.
Flav says Trey and Jessie have led the same amount of game-winning drives since high school. Thinking Trey will just be able to do this consistently is delusional. Guy has 0 experience, leading drive with game on the line. Yeah, I mean, will he be able to like consistently win games at the end? Like, no one does, but neither does Jimmy. Like, Jimmy lost at the end in Seattle. He lost to Seattle twice last year. He almost threw a pick in Cincinnati, had to get a second chance in overtime to win that game. I mean, he blew it in the Super Bowl. He blew it in the NFC Championship game. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Trey Lance is going to be a Pro Bowler or a Hall of Famer, but it's time to let him see what he can do, because the only person standing in his way is like the 27th best quarterback in the league. Jimmy, go be a backup somewhere else. And I don't know if the Niners were right to trade up for Trey Lance. I don't know if he was worth 3 first-round picks, but I know he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo, because Jimmy's going to be a backup quarterback this year. James Richard.
I got a few things to say about this. One, okay, it's fair. I don't know for sure. It's impossible, but you also don't know for sure that he can't lead game-winning drives. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it can't be done. That's one. 2, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't lead game-winning drives. Every time he does, let's go through the games real quick. Packers, he needed a second chance. Why? Because he threw a backwards pass, gave the Packers the ball. If the Packers get a touchdown there, which they should have, game's over anyways. He doesn't get the second chance. Then he goes and scores, and then the narrative changes to, well, the defense couldn't hold. Jimmy did his job. He got a second chance there.
Yeah, defense held before. Yeah, after his backwards pass.
Cincinnati, second chance. Jessie Bates should have pick 6 that. Not only that, if Jimmy Garoppolo hits an out pattern, the drive before that drive, a wide open Debo who he was looking at and passed up for an underneath route on a 3rd down, if he hits that pass, game's over anyways. So really, he needed 3 chances there. Then we go to the Rams in week 18. They got stifled when they needed the game-winning drive. 3 and out. We thought the game was over. They get a second chance. Then Jimmy goes and leads a game-tying drive. We go into overtime. The rest is history. Jimmy's not leading game-winning drives on his first time around. He's the king of second chances, the king of circumstances, and people lead it up. So I'm just not buying any of this, man. I mean,
he's like Tony Romo or Drew Brees or something. Like, the guy is a liability, and that's why no one wants him to be their starting quarterback this year. He's going to be a backup. And the thing is, like, Trey's an unknown. I'll take an unknown with talent over Jimmy Garoppolo, who is a known, he's not good enough. That's why he's a backup now. because you know he's not good enough, and he's 30. So, I mean, he's going to have to get a second chance after sitting out for a while and really impress people because his day is over. There's always going to be someone younger, someone more tantalizing who's going to get a shot over Jimmy because you know what he is and is not good enough. So, look, that's all it is. You can't trade up to number 3 and sit the dude on the bench for 2 years because you have Jimmy G on your team. If you had Tom Brady, maybe, or Aaron Rodgers, that's the only way you could justify doing that. You can't justify it with Jimmy freaking G. Sorry, Flay, but you can keep arguing with me.
If he's so good, and if Trey Lance is as good as what we think he can be, there's a possibility they don't need many game-winning drives because they're just winning the game.
That's true,
right? Like you don't need game-winning drives if you're just winning games. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like the defense is going to keep him in the game. You know who kept the other team in the game the last couple of years? Jimmy. He kept the other team in the game. The Niners defense was playing elite football. The running game was playing elite football, but the quarterback over here being like, "Come on, let's not hurt the other team's feelings." You know what I mean? We have to be out here 3 hours with these guys. Look at their faces. They're demoralized. Let me pep them up a little. That's Jimmy. He keeps both teams in the game. It's quite big of him.
He's been more of a 12th man for Seattle than any of those fans ever have been. Let's be clear about that.
The one real Zangetsu donates $1. Thank you. Damian Jasso says, Grant, love the show. What's so special about Jimmy's command in the huddle? Laugh my ass off. I think he's got like, I think he's got a lot of bass in his voice when he says it, whatever he says. And I think his eyes twinkle. There's a twinkle in his eye.
When he says whatever he says.
Well, I don't know what he said. He repeats the play. Damian Jasso, thank you. C. Turley says, can you realistically see Jimmy getting traded to Seattle? No, I can't. That's an arch enemy, guaranteed 2-0 record, though. I think, well, hold on. We'll talk about, I'm not going to dismiss the idea of a trade. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Double B Studio says, what date does Jimmy need to be off the roster?
The day before game 1.
Dude, who says he's going to be off the roster? I'm telling you, they got a 3rd round comp pick waiting. That's Danny Gray. That's Ambry Thomas. Love them.
If they want to save that money, they got to do it the day before game 1. That's really what it comes down to.
All right. So we're going to get back to the trade stuff in a minute, but part of the report is that Adam Schefter said that Jimmy Garoppolo's cleared. Ian Rappaport said not fully cleared to make all the throws. Schefter says, yeah, okay, but he's cleared to practice, but the Niners are going to be extremely cautious with him. What does that mean? Does that mean that he's cleared to practice but won't? That's what it sounds like. How do you interpret it?
Yeah, that's exactly that. It's code for we don't want him around this team. And so we're going to use his injury as an excuse as to why he's not able to be around this team because he's still rehabbing and he's on track, right? He's on track. That's what we kept hearing. He's on track. He's been throwing for weeks. What do we mean he's on track? This man could pass a freaking physical tomorrow. That's what it sounds like to me. That's the vibe I get. If you've been throwing for multiple weeks, you're a quarterback. You're paid to throw the football. If you can throw the football, sounds like you can pass a physical. So to me, this is them using that again as that out so they can say, hey, Jimmy's not here because he's rehabbing. That's their way of being cautious with the situation.
Yeah, and it's funny. It comes out the day after Ian Rappaport said, not fully cleared, not going to be thrown until not fully cleared until mid-August. And then the implication was, well, that really I felt hurt any trade value that he might have had. And so the next day, Ian Rappaport's main competitor comes out with clearly different information from a different source saying, wait a second, Jimmy is cleared, but the Niners don't want him to practice, but he wants to practice because he's a tough guy and he's a hero and everyone loves Jimmy. It just feels like people like Jimmy's nice, so people are nice about Jimmy in the media. Like, oh, he's such a nice guy. I can't say what he really is. Anyway, being cautious with Jimmy means he's in bubble wrap. If you want to trade for, we know that if any quarterback is likely to get hurt around the league in camp, it's Jimmy. So we'll put him in bubble wrap and wait for some other quarterback maybe to get hurt in a game, in a practice, and then Jimmy's ready because he hasn't been touched. Otherwise,
I bet you $1 million if Team B has their quarterback go down, you see Jimmy throwing immediately. That film hits Twitter timelines. I guarantee it.
Do you think they'll throw him in a preseason game, or do you think the throwing he'll have to do is like a private session in front of a team?
Yeah, I think it would just be more of like a private type thing. Yeah, and it may not even be with the team. Like it just may be him rehabbing and showing that he can throw a 12-yard in pattern. That's what he does.
Pretty much over and over and over again. All right. So I think there's a real possibility that this drags out on into the season to the trade deadline. But either way, if the Niners are going to trade Jimmy G, it seems to me that they're going to have to pick up most or all of the money on his, but certainly most. And here's why. I mean, most teams don't even have the cap space to take him. I don't think there's any teams really in the market for that $27 million contract. So, but from the Niners' perspective, they're right in the position right now where they would potentially be willing to spend $27 million for a third-round comp pick, right? That's kind of what they're bluffing, positioning. That's the position they're in. We might spend $27 million to get the 104th pick in the draft. All right, okay. If you would do that, would you pay $27 million to a team for them to take Jimmy and maybe get a better third-round pick or a late two? I mean, like, if you would pay $27 million for a third-round comp, what does $27 million really get if you offer that to another team? We'll pay for you to have Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Just give us the best pick possible. What do you think they would get if they would pay for the entire freaking salary?
Man, I don't, because Baker's younger. Baker's more talented. Now, he's not the quote unquote leader that Jimmy is. I think I would agree with that. But
real quick, hold on. So the Niners call up the Seattle Seahawks and they're like, look, we will pay for Jimmy Garoppolo to play for you this year. We want a second round pick. The Seattle going to be like, we're good. Thanks. Oh! You're paying us to have Jimmy Garoppolo and you just want a second round pick? No, we'll give you fourth.
Yeah, because Baker Mayfield went for what? Wasn't it a fifth? And it was not even a fifth. It's a future fifth, which is basically equivalent to a sixth round pick. Baker Mayfield got traded for a sixth round pick, and they had to eat half that salary. So now Jimmy's going to go for a second, even a third. There's no. I can't see it.
$27 million for your second round pick. We have to have Jimmy though.
That's.
Can we cut Jimmy? Can we just cut him? Maybe they'll do that.
How messed up would that be? Oh my gosh!
$27 million for the second round pick. Okay, we'll just cut Jimmy though. I don't know.
Yeah, no, because again, it goes back to
willing to spend $27 million for that third round comp. You might just buy a pick.
That again, to me, like this goes back to this is a major mistake. If you pay a single solitary cent for Jimmy Garoppolo and it doesn't net at least a second round pick, you can't make that trade. You can't do it.
Would you rather have a second or third round pick or $27 million rolled over to next year?
$27 million, no question about it.
Yeah, agree. But I think the Niners would consider doing this because to me, again, it's all about John Lynch's win-loss record. I mean, he's a good general manager. He's got a good team. He's got a good roster, but the trades, he hasn't won a lot of them. DeForest Buckner, D Ford. I think he's sensitive about that. So I think it means something to him to get that third round comp pick, to get something and be like, look, we moved off of Jimmy, but we got back what we gave up for him. I think that means something to him. It shouldn't, but I think it does.
It certainly shouldn't because I think they've already won that trade. I mean, let's be real. You're talking about a guy who was essentially your starter. I mean, he didn't start because he was injured or whatever, but he was your starting quarterback going into 4 seasons. That's worth a second round pick for a team that was making the playoffs and making deep runs. Whether it was him or not, they've already won that trade. I mean, a second round pick is not a lot for a guy who can start in the league at the quarterback position. It just isn't. They've already won the trade. So, like, why at this point you're being petty about it?
I mean, the problem really wasn't the trade; it was the extension.
Right. Well, and not
after 5 games, he's the highest paid player in the league. That's great, and you're going to give him every single penny of that deal too. That's even better.
Honestly, it wasn't even the extension grant. It's not taking the outs in that. They've had outs since the end of 2019. You passed on Tom Brady. You passed on starting Trey Lance. Right?
I wanted them to get Tom Brady.
I know. But you the franchise, right? And so you had multiple outs as a franchise and you chose not to take those outs. Yeah. That's where I have the issue. because Parag actually did some really nasty work in setting up that contract, giving you multiple ways to get out. And you're like, oh no, we'll just, and then even better, if they do keep him this year, Grant, now you're actually saying, not only did we pass on Tom Brady, not only did we allow our rookie quarterback to develop the way that we should have so that we could go win a Super Bowl this year, but to top it off, he's a backup and we're still going to pay him this money. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, that makes it look bad. Sean says, thank you for the $20, Sean. I just got some insider information. My cousin is a mid-level staffer for the Niners org, and he overheard a meeting. He found out Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the team. I liked it.
That's good.
Set it up. I thought he really was going to have something there for a second.
I did too.
That was hilarious.
I thought it was going to have to do with like price or something like that. That's awesome. That
Unreal. Cool. Can't believe it. John, can you confirm? John, I just wanted to call. I'm hearing from multiple sources that Jimmy Garoppolo is still on your roster. This can't be true. Tell me. Can't be true. It's July 20th. On the goal line says, Jessie, I still want that Jimmy G bet if Jimmy G ends up in Seattle.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we'll take that bet.
Zach Bowen says, won't surprise me if Jimmy G doesn't land with anyone. Love the show. Go Niners. Man, that's harsh. I think people would love him as a backup.
For sure.
I mean, he's such a good guy. Backup? Just for the the potlucks alone. I mean, he brings pizza. People like him. He's the life of the party. You got to have him on the team.
He's got a swimming pool. Nobody else on the team has a swimming pool. Jimmy Garoppolo has a swimming pool like that.
Remember those potlucks at the end of the soccer season? Like whoever brought the pizza was like, "You're my new best friend. Thank you."
Oh, for sure.
I didn't know you were going to be that kid, but I'm glad you are. Miguel Santana says Kyle already said D Ford won't be on this team. Yeah, he says a lot of things. All I know is that he's still on the team.
Sure. They could have cut him after June 1st. They could have cut him any day after June 1st. That was it. So why? I'm not saying I'm not willing to go to bat for him and say he's for sure making this team. It's just a little weird that when you could have cut him for, I don't know, the last 40 or so days, you've chosen not to. That's a little strange.
Flav says Jimmy has actually led a game-winning drive in the NFL. Trey hasn't done anything? ? Exclamation point. Is he asking? In a loud voice, I think. In what profession do you just assume someone knows how to do something with experience? Football. Use your head, Jess. You're hoping. Hold on. So by Flav's logic, any NFL quarterback who has led a game-winning drive is a better quarterback than Trey Lance, or more valuable than Trey Lance. But that's just not the case. I mean, there's a reason why Trey Lance went top 5, why teams were interested in him. I'd rather have him than Brian Hoyer. I'd rather have him than Nick Mullins. I'd rather have him than Jimmy Garoppolo. If the Niners had a Pro Bowl quarterback, there'd be a discussion in sitting this guy another year. But they don't. Jimmy is not good. He has the best team, the best defense, the best weapons, and the guy can't make it to the Pro Bowl. It is time for someone else to get a shot. And if Trey Lance can't get it done, then someone else will get a shot. All we know is that he's the next man up. He's up. It's his turn. We've seen enough of Jimmy. This is Jimmy's fault, Flav. If Jimmy were better, Trey'd be on the bench still, but he's not.
Well, while you were talking, I just looked up, 6 or so quarterbacks that have come into the league in the last few years and were rookies. They all had multiple game-winning drives. So to assume that somebody, so if something hasn't happened by your proclamation, if something hasn't happened, that means it cannot happen.
Yeah.
So why does any quarterback ever come into the pros and ever have a game-winning drive? Because it's never been shown. So I think assuming that a quarterback can play the quarterback position in the fourth quarter, just like he could in the first quarter, is not that weird of an assumption.
Also, Flav, just like wait a month. These are all like statistical anomalies because of the pandemic and because Kyle Shanahan had a bad win-loss record when he drafted Trey Lance and needed to get some wins out of Jimmy Garoppolo. Just wait for it. This, like all the things he's never done, he'll do it in September. So just wait for it. And once Trey starts winning, then the Jimmy Garoppolo hive, the Jimmy Garoppolo stands are going to have nothing to point to with their guy. Jimmy's going to be standing there holding the clipboard saying, I just win. And his replacement's going to be there winning with better numbers, playing better football. And Jimmy's whatever he was going to make on the open market next year, it's just going to go down because everyone's going to look at him and be like, I'm sorry, remind me what you did, what you brought to the table in San Francisco. Because it looks like nothing is what's going to happen.
Let's also say this. Again, let's go back to the original point. Nobody for sure knows what Trey's going to be. We're projecting, right? And we're using past experience to project, right? Whether good or bad. None of us truly know. But one thing we do know for a fact is Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers will not win a Super Bowl. And here's how we know that. We know that in two ways. One, he's had multiple chances and has not got it done. That's one. Mm-hmm. Two, we know from past experiences in the NFL. One thing I can tell you is no quarterback since 1986, other than Joe Flacco, has won a Super Bowl without making a Pro Bowl. So why would Jimmy be any different? It's just not going to happen. So if we know that Jimmy is not the answer, we don't know if Trey's the answer or not. We know Jimmy's not the answer. So why would we continue to waste time on a guy that we know is not the answer because we have a guy that we're not sure is the answer or not? You have to figure it out.
Flacco was like strangely elite in the playoffs for whatever reason.
Extremely elite.
I mean,
very opposite of Jimmy.
He threw 25 touchdown passes and 10 picks in the playoffs. Like in 2012, he threw 11 touchdowns and no picks. You understand how good he was that year that he won the Super? Jimmy's never done anything like that. He's been a passenger at best and an arsonist at worst in the playoffs. Joe Flacco, like, outplayed Tom Brady, outplayed Peyton Manning. I mean, multiple times. I don't know who that guy thought he was. Eli Manning had a little bit of that in him too. Two guys who were really mediocre quarterbacks, but in the playoffs, they were actually better.
Yeah.
They were better.
Yeah, something about him.
As opposed to Jimmy, who's way worse. Okay. Thank you, Flav. F you, Jobu. I do it myself. I don't get it. Is it possible the Niners allow Jimmy Garoppolo to seek a trade to prove the lack of a starter market so that they can renegotiate his contract? Hey, man, you want to be a starter? You think a team wants you? Go ahead. Let us know which team that is because it's not Cleveland. And then the only team that actually has cap space to trade for you in your 27. So you let me know. It's not Cleveland. When you find out that it's no one, let us know because what we're going to do, what they could do, is cut him on the last day of camp and say, look, you could leave and go somewhere else and maybe start, but you don't know their playbook. You haven't been in their training camp, and we'll pay you more. We'll pay you $1 million more than your best offer just to be our backup. And who knows? If Trey Lance get hurt, you can be back in the saddle. So we'll see. Does Jimmy Garoppolo bet on himself, take less to maybe start somewhere else? The Niners could save money that way. They could do that.
And I'm not necessarily fully against that. I personally don't think having Jimmy here is good for Jimmy or is good for the 49ers just because this is a guy who was looked at as a leader on this team and now all of a sudden is here to take a backup role. But I'm not totally against cutting him and then re-signing him for, say, $8 million, right. $10 million even.
Right.
Just for that insurance. And then maybe give him some incentives that it's like, hey, if you start 4 games or 3 games, you get X amount. Something like that. Like, I'm not necessarily totally against that.
Run to Seattle and play behind that atrocious offensive line and try to learn that system in 2 weeks and see how it goes.
Yeah. I'm more open to that than just keeping him at $27 million. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. That might be what the Niners do. This good call. Whoever.
No, that's a great comment.
Daniel Ailman says that the Niners stayed at 12 and drafted Mac Jones. Are they Super Bowl chance right now? I think yes. Trey might be better long-term, but one chip equals. I don't think so. I'm not that excited about Mac Jones. He was pretty not so great down the stretch, not so great in the playoffs. I think he's an average NFL quarterback, which is remarkable for a rookie, but I don't think he's going to be ever much better than average, in my opinion. He's like Tua. He's the right-handed Tua.
I don't see the over love for Mac. I mean, Mac's going to be fine. Like he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to start in the league for many, many years. I mean,
top 10 though.
He was slightly better than Jimmy last year, but I don't know if he was enough better to make them win a Super Bowl. I mean, he didn't look that great against Buffalo in the playoffs.
To win a Super Bowl, I think you have to have a quarterback who's either top 10 in the league or can play like it for an entire playoff stretch. Foles could play like it in the playoffs. Flacco could do it in the playoffs. Eli could do it in the playoffs. Jim can't. He's not a top 10 quarterback in the regular season, and he's definitely not one in the playoffs. Mac Jones, he just seems like good, but not good enough. Like a better Jimmy.
And maybe Mac Jones gets to that Kirk Cousins level, right? And I've been on record for saying that if this team had Kirk Cousins, they'd have a couple rings. I do believe that. But Mac Jones as a rookie was not as good as Kirk Cousins at this point in his career. Maybe in 2-3 years, maybe you can have that argument,
I'm not
but not right
100% sold
now.
on Kirk Cousins either because he is good, but I mean, he's had some
More
real
sold on
sleeper
Kirk than I
performances.
am Mac.
Oh, true. I agree. Nathan Flores says, I think Flav is Jimmy Two Picks or one of his brothers. Matthew Sanders says, Flav been on the sauce since noon Pacific today. He's the unmasked superego of Jimmy Stan, or he's Jimmy's crush. Can't tell yet. Hard to say, but he actually just left another one. We're going to get to it in a minute. C. Turley says, Niners had an elite drive, Flav. Niners had an elite drive, Flav. They won in spite of Jimmy. Can Trey do worse than Jimmy? No, he can't. You both agree Kyle's playbook is more explosive with Trey. I mean, all the good things they say about what Jimmy does, like, his completion percentage, yards per attempt, it's the system. I mean, Mullins had a high yards per attempt. Lance has a high yards per attempt. He had a higher yards per completion than Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, a lot of it is just the system. And Jimmy doesn't even do it that well.
The argument I've been making since last year, Grant, as to why Trey Lance should have started last year, this team ran the ball 49% of the time.
Right.
So if you run the ball 49% of the time, can Trey Lance help in the thing that you do half the time?
Yeah.
Certainly he can.
It's
Does Jimmy
to run when it's 11 on 11 than 10 on 11.
Right. Jimmy doesn't help at all in the run game.
And again, like, why are you running that much? You're invested heavy. You have an all-pro wide receiver. You have a formerly all-pro tight end. You spent a first-round pick that you traded up for as a number 2. You're very invested in your receivers. And yet you have to run the ball more than any team other than Seattle because of Jimmy. Not because that's what you want to do. Jimmy's can't make it seem like, well, that's just what Kyle wants to do. Like, no, not really. I mean, he wants to be somewhat balanced, but Jimmy forces him to throw this much, to run that more, It's not just it's out of whack. It's more than any other team except for Seattle. So, yeah.
I just, to me, it's basic math. So if you help in 49% of the game, let's say the other 51%, he's only effective in 25% of that. Well, you're still helping in 74% of the game. Even if Jimmy helps in all 51%, that's still less because he's not helping in the run game. Like, this is simple math to me.
Yeah. 808 Niners says the Pats drafted Duke Dawson, a DB, with the Niners pick. If they get anything for Jimmy, it's a win. They made a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game. That's greater value than Duke Dawson. Didn't they trade down and get a bunch of people?
I think so. I don't
think it was just
exactly
one guy. I'll have to check that out. Thanks for the $10. So I think they traded down and made it like a lot of people. That's
either way, I think that the Niners have won, right?
Yeah, move on, John. Flav, love you, man. He's giving me like $100 today. This guy's really nice. LOL, all love, fellas. Fun seeing all the people in the chat get fired up. Would pay double for this. No, really, there needs to be more people bringing this perspective to the argument because it's a fun argument. Hope I'm wrong about Trey, but if not, I'll at least get to make Grant wear it for the next 5 years. Yeah, that's true. If Trey ends up being worse than Jimmy Garoppolo, I have to say I will be really, really shocked, and it will shake me because I feel like I just believe it, and I feel like I've seen enough, and it's a truth, an axiom that I live by. And if it turns out that I'm wrong, it's really going to humble me, but I'm not wrong. Now, I'm not saying Trey's going to be Patrick Mahomes. I never said he would be elite or that he would end up necessarily justifying the trade. But from day one, I'm like, this guy's better than Jimmy. He's better than Jimmy. That's it. And that's what I'm standing on.
If the bet is –
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, if the bet is him being Patrick Mahomes, I'm not taking that bet. But if the bet is he's better than Jimmy, I'm betting my house and everything in it confidently that he will be that in his career. No question about it. But Flav, I got to give you credit because you're right. At the end of the day, nobody's going to remember Flav from June 20th on Grant's show. If you never show your face again, you win, right? Like, it's cool. You can walk away. Everybody remembers what I say and what Grant says here on 49ers After Dark. And it's here on video, so we can be held accountable. People know where to find us. So that's a smart move by you.
There is a big difference between Jimmy and Trey. Steve Young's talked about it. Jimmy doesn't seem to care. Like, he'll throw 3 picks in practice, come out smiling like he just lit it up. Like, he just has this next play attitude, which to me, like, bothers me. But because to me, it's over the top with Jimmy. But actually, it's a good thing. Like, you don't need to be having a guy like fretting over one imperfection. Trey's on the other side. Trey's a perfectionist. And what Steve's saying is he can't be too much of a perfectionist because there's a lot of pressure on him. And, like Trubisky was too much of a perfectionist. The guy I think of is Alex Smith. Alex Smith is a perfectionist. And there'd be times when a guy was open and he would see it, but he wouldn't pull the trigger because he wasn't open enough. And I think Trey might be like that a little bit, but that's okay because he's not going to turn the ball over a lot, I don't think. And if he's a super Alex Smith, like an Alex Smith with a super strong arm and faster legs, and like that's a really good quarterback. That's a better. I mean, Alex Smith was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. A super Alex Smith. That's not exactly probably what you thought you were getting when you traded up, but if that's the floor for Trey Lance, Alex Smith, okay, I like that. If that's the floor.
The thing about I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's it. That's it. Like, we think the floor is much higher than Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's really all it comes down to. And we'll see. Time's gonna tell, but I'm very confident in what Trey Lance is ultimately going to bring. But I will say this: you were talking about the perfectionist side, so maybe mid game, it's not the best to kind of worry about the last play. Like, I think there is an art to being able to forget the last play and move on, good or bad. A lot of quarterbacks talk about that. But I can also tell you that one thing that Jimmy hasn't done because of that aw shucks attitude is he hasn't taken it seriously enough, in my opinion, to fix those routine mistakes that he makes, and he continually makes them.
Well put.
Trey Lance already, and this is all over film if you go watch it, will make a mistake. And later on in that very same game, not the next game, that very same game will get the same exact look and make the right decision because he is a perfectionist and he is holding himself accountable. Just like when a game is over and Jimmy is the reason that they lost and they say, hey, Jimmy, what happened on those picks? Well, we got to do we. But when they ask Trey Lance, he's like, yeah, I got to be better there. This is what I was looking at. I got to be better.
You know who was a perfectionist to a fault? Nick Mullins.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if the game got off to a hot start, he'd be confident. He'd be good. He come in relief. He'd light it up. He'd be good. That game against the Raiders, he was good. It didn't go well in the first quarter. It was snowball on him. And you could sort of see him like lose confidence and lose belief in himself. And it's like, man, you can't have that temperament and be a starting quarterback or be a professional athlete. Definitely not a starting quarterback. So I don't think Trey's going to be like that, where he throws a pick in the first quarter and all of a sudden he just has the worst start ever. I think we've seen him. He's a very confident person, very confident athlete. And I think he can bounce back. Steve Young was a perfectionist to a degree. He just wasn't too much of one. I think Trey Lance, anyway, it was interesting for Steve to talk about it. Like, it's a good thing, but not too much. And this is where he's at. Yeah. He has to make sure he's not too much. Because I guess the pressure is, you got to replace a guy who won 75% of his starts. There's no margin for error here. Same thing with Wentz. You got to replace a guy who won the Super Bowl. There's no margin for error here. That's tough. But at the same time, you got to realize, like, dude, you're replacing Jimmy G. That guy didn't care. I mean, he cared, but I mean, he had no conscience, is what I'm trying to say. He had no conscience. You don't have to have a conscience or a big one. Just don't throw.
And he didn't, to me, again, he didn't have the drive to ever want to be a great player. Like, I just didn't see that from Jimmy.
Double B Studio says, let's not forget Jimmy practices picks in practice. Trey practices avoiding sacks and completing passes. Kyle has more to prove than Trey, right? Right. Good point.
I mean, if Trey isn't good, it's ultimately, I mean, we'll get made fun of a little bit, but Kyle might lose his job.
Like, Tom Brady, no. Matthew Stafford, no. Trey Lance, yes. So, I mean, there's a little bit of pressure on this. Brian Beltran says Mac Jones made the Pro Bowl skills completion. Okay. Okay. People love them some Mac Jones. Brian Beltran says Mac Jones made the Pro Bowl. Jimmy did not. Yeah, I don't know.
But he was an alternate.
Mac Jones made the Pro Bowl. He's an alternate. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember people saying Jimmy looked better than Brady in practice. Tell me when he actually does something. I can't believe that. I also remember, I think that was propaganda because it was Tom Curran. Someone said that Jimmy Garoppolo was the worst practice quarterback they ever had in New England. And that to me sounds correct because he is the worst practice quarterback I've ever seen. I mean, Brian Hoyer was better in practice than Jimmy Garoppolo. I cannot imagine that in New England he was lighting it up in practice and over here he'd be this much of a liability in his own practice setting. No, I don't buy that at all.
Didn't he throw like 5 picks in a row?
The players were down on Jimmy. I mean, we heard what Martellus Bennett and Julian Edelman and Jimmy have the same agent. Julian Edelman and Martellus Bennett were down on Jimmy. Jimmy was never going to lead that team, and that never got leaked out. I don't think John Lynch knew when he traded for Jimmy Garoppolo that actually the locker room had basically vetoed Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was never going to have that team. I don't think he knew that. So I don't know how we got in this. Thanks, Flav. Appreciate you. People giving it more than all.
Hey, Flav, also open invitation. I mean, you can call in. I do Thursday open mics on my show. I'll gladly have the. Yeah, I mean, I love that you're paying here, but like if you want to actually have the conversation and go back and forth, we can do that on my channel for sure.
Flav says, no, Jess, I actually want to be wrong. Emotional hedge. If Trey is good, Niners are good. I'm happy. If not, at least I was right. That's a good place to be as a fan.
For sure.
You know, because you're never wrong. The team is wrong. Why? You're not wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Flav, appreciate you. WB Studio says, I say Kyle has more to prove than Trey this year because third downs need to improve as well as red zone TDs. Kyle uses Trey right. Kyle will prove he can coach up quarterbacks and turn them champions. I mean, he's got to prove that he made the right choice at quarterback. You know, he's really not made the right choice at quarterback yet. It's year 6. If he could make the right choice now, all will be forgiven. Because, you know, Patrick Mahomes is lurking. That decision, the Tom Brady decision, hasn't gotten past that.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
808 Niner says they won the trade because if not, they don't get Jimmy. Jimmy doesn't get hurt, and we don't get Bosa. It's a lot of ways to look at it. All right. Sean says Trey Lance's number one asset is how hard he works to become better, setting aside rare physical freaks like Randy Moss. The vast majority of the greats in sports obsessively worked on their game. Yeah. I think his temperament's a lot like Alex Smith, who did everything right. He's just way more gifted than Alex Smith was.
That's the key. That's the key is he does have maybe not free. He doesn't have freakish physical traits, but for a quarterback, he's pretty damn athletic. He certainly has a top tier arm, and he has the drive and the want to be better. That's good.
If there was a spider chart, you know what I mean, of like all the different attributes a quarterback could have, his would be pretty well balanced and large. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, I know some people might have a better spiral or more accuracy, but just the whole thing, I think he's the most gifted quarterback I've ever seen. Still, I think he just is above average in so many, because it's like dozens and dozens and dozens of things that quarterbacks have to do. But
for sure.
Jimmy lost his drive after winning with Tom, says William Bennett. Did he? He had a drive?
Yeah, he does. He does have more rings than any quarterback in the league other than Tom right now. So maybe.
Okay. Give me a player or two who needs to show out in training camp.
All right. So first one that comes to mind, Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon, you were in the doghouse last year. You remember at some point last year he scrubbed his social media accounts and took all the 49ers stuff off. I mean, he did what Debo did pre-Debo. He was the original Debo with that. Except for he was pouting when he did it. It wasn't over a contract negotiation. He was upset that he wasn't basically just given what he probably felt he was worth. And I believe, at least from what I've seen, it seems like he's grown through that. He's pushed through that. And he realizes that, hey, that's not how you're a professional in this league. You got to earn your spot, regardless of what you did in college, where you were drafted, any of that. None of that matters. You have to earn your spot every single day. And if he can learn that, you're going to get a lot of run playing next to Trey Lance, because the one time that you actually did look pretty explosive was when you played with Trey Lance in the second half against Seattle. So Trey Sermon, you've got a guy in Ty Davis Price who was also just drafted in the 3rd round, but you have a year advantage on him. You know what it's like to be a pro. He doesn't necessarily know that. You've got a short leash though, because they did try to draft your replacement potentially. You got to go out and prove it and do it very, very quickly, I believe.
That's a good name. Okay. I got some names. On defense, Javon Kinlaw. Like, if he can have a consistent camp where he's out there every day doing all the drills and participating, I think he's talented enough to be a good player. But if he's missing, if he's on, missing every other day, out there, not out there, I don't know. I think he needs to be consistently practicing to take the next step. Because we saw last year, they tried that with him last year. On a day, off a day, manage him, didn't work. I need to see that everyone needs to see that this knee procedure worked and that he can be out there. He was like 24 years old. He should be able to practice every day. And if he can, I think he's going to have a really successful season. That's what I want to see. And then it's funny, he's going to be going up in one-on-ones. He didn't do any one-on-ones last year. That was a red flag. When he's doing one-on-ones this year, he's going to be going up against Aaron Banks a lot. That's another guy. And it's going to be fun to watch him go head-to-head because Banks, I mean, he might be a starting caliber offensive lineman. He might be good, or he might not. He might be Josh Garnett. Got to find out. Because if he's not good, they got to find something else. They got to put Colton McKivitz in there or do something. Aaron Banks has to show something in camp. And he'll get every opportunity.
I like that. I think another guy that has to show something is Talanoa Hufanga.
Yeah.
Right? Like they got rid of Tart, who has played with Jimmy Ward for a long time in high school and at the professional level. Guy who has some chemistry. Let's be real. I mean, Tart he's highly overrated when you listen to the fan base or certain parts of the fan base. But that being said, he is extremely inexpensive. And he's a starting level safety at a very cheap price. He's the 99th highest paid safety in the league right now, Grant. So if you passed up paying him at the 99th highest paid safety, and that's not overall, that's annually. So we got a 1-year deal and is annually the 99th highest paid safety. If you pass that up for Talanoa Hufanga, then he's not a starting level safety. Right. That's a problem. That's a problem. So he has to show out as well. Yep.
I agree. Good names. Okay. Final topic. And then 49ers After Dark is going dark for a week. ESPN ranks the 49ers 10th in their future power rankings. Will you explain how they came to this conclusion?
Yeah, this was actually a pretty cool little deal they did. You have to have ESPN Plus to have read the article, but
you have that?
I do because I'm a UFC, I'm an MMA guy. And so in order to get UFC pay-per-views, you have to have ESPN Plus. It's kind of a part of the deal they got. So yeah, I do. So what they did was they projected the next 3 years for every team. And they power ranked them based off of how they think those teams are going to do over the next 3 years. They gave rankings for how your roster is without the quarterback. Where does it rank? How's your quarterback? Coaching, everything. They did a really, really good job with this. But they had the 49ers ranked 10th, tied for 10th with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you the teams they had ranked above them. We'll kind of go one by one quickly.
Real quick, just so people know like what the categories are.
Yeah.
It's overall roster minus quarterback, coaching, draft, and front office, and they give everything like a 1 to 100 grade with a decimal point. It's very scientific. I love when there's a decimal point because now I take it seriously. Okay, let's go.
It just makes you seem extra smart with decimal points.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Like the Niners have a coaching grade of 91.0. That's fifth best. They have an overall roster grade minus quarterback of 85.5, not 85.4. Fuck that. 85.5.
Rounding up, baby. That's as good as 86. That's where I come from.
Yeah.
So
don't get crazy. They're not quite at 86 level yet.
Right. But if you're rounding up, Grant, I mean, this is Price is Right rules. All right. Yeah. So the teams they had above them were the Bills, which no issue. These first 6 or so teams I have no issue with. And I'll tell you why in a second. Bills, Chiefs, Packers, Rams, Chargers, Bengals, Ravens. Those were the first 7 or so they had above them. I really don't have an issue with that. And the reason is because those teams all have an established quarterback. We've been going back and forth with Flav a little bit, kind of razzing him, and he's been razzing us. But at the end of the day, we really, truly don't know what Trey Lance is yet, right? And those guys have established.
Yeah.
Right. And these guys have established top 10 guys, right? And so if you have that, you're automatically ahead of things. Now, here's where I draw an issue. I think the 49ers should probably be next on this list, them or Cleveland, but they went with the Bucks, who, I mean, what they're going to have 1 year probably of Tom Brady. And then what after that? Where do you go to after that? I mean, talk about a question mark. You don't even know who the starter is after Tom Brady retires, right? So I have an issue with that. And then the Colts, who have had a revolving door at the quarterback position for the last few years. Yeah. So those rosters may be good.
Right. In fact, that whole regime could get fired in a year if Matt Ryan doesn't save their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue Super Bowl window. Now, I think there's multiple ways you can look at this, but when I say is the Super Bowl window open, that means wide open. Like you're competing now for a Super Bowl. I think the 49ers window over the next 2 years is more wide open than what the Chiefs is, to be frank with you, because the Chiefs are going to pay Mahomes a lot of money. They're already starting to lose some good pieces, and their roster is nowhere near as built as the 49ers. And I do expect Trey Lance is going to be a top 7 to 12 guy. And if I believe that, I think their window is way more wide open than the Chiefs is. I think the Chiefs is slightly closed for a couple years. Now with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, it can open at any point. But right now, if I'm just forecasting, I think it's closing. And I think the 49ers window is opening. So I don't know. To me, I think the 49ers are a little bit too low. But if you don't have an established quarterback for the next 3 years, it's worse than having a question mark of at least a guy that's on the roster. We don't even know for the Bucs and Colts who the hell is going to be there next year.
Let me go through the Niners grades because they're fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Like what they think of the Niners. So overall roster minus quarterback, 85.5. That's 7th best in the league. That's high praise.
Yeah.
Very high praise for a team that has, question marks. And we've talked about it all offseason at like 5 different positions. People think the Niners are better than solid, like borderline elite. Quarterback, 76, 18th. Okay, that's kind of low, especially in a future ranking where you're thinking like someone you invest in for the future, Trey Lance. I mean, top 3 pick. Okay, so coaching 91, that's 5th. So the roster is 7th, the coaching is 5th. That's usually a good team, but draft 19th, 76.8. Well, that's all about the quarterback position. And then front office, 80, that's 16th. Again, that's all about the quarterback position. So if Trey Lance is good, then all the other grades go up. It's all about Lance. And to me, again, I just feel like there's too much. It's been a long time since a team took a quarterback and sat him for a year, especially a guy that was drafted that high. People are confused. And I think people are too down on Trey Lance. I mean, there's 17 quarterbacks you'd rather build around in the future than Trey Lance. 17? I mean, I doubt that. I don't think so. I think more likely that he'd be, even with only 2 starts under his belt, closer to 10. Just off pedigree. So I don't know. I feel like, maybe they're overestimating the coaching a little bit. Maybe they're overestimating the roster a little bit and underestimating Trey. I don't know. But to come out at 10th, maybe that's overall fair. I mean, there are some question marks in this team.
There definitely is. There definitely is. But basically, they echoed what I thought, which is, okay, so it's a top 7 roster. You have 7 teams that Right. And you at least have a quarterback on the team for the next 3 years, we would think, and Trey Lance. Yeah. Those other teams don't even have a quarterback guaranteed on their roster for the next 3 years. So the unknown with the 49ers is less than what the Bucs and the Colts have. Now, the difference is they probably believe that, well, with at least even 1 year of Matt Ryan or Tom Brady, we know what those guys are. And so that maybe that team can win this year. And so that's enough to put them ahead out of, 33% chance to win this year, I guess. But I also feel like they missed. They added the draft thing, which was cool, but they missed on player development. That was a category that they could have added, and that would have balanced out the whole draft thing, in my opinion.
That's a good point. I guess you'd have to put that in coaching or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, it's a good point. What else I want to say? I'll remember it in a minute. Zach Bowen says, Aaron Banks is my choice. I think we really need him to be good this year. Our O-line kind of scares me right now. McGlinchey too, man. McGlinchey. Dude, be out. He said he was going to be ready for the beginning of training camp. You better be. Because I don't know. I mean, look, he's a disappointment. He wasn't worth the top 10 pick. He's a solid right tackle. Okay? He's a solid right tackle. He can be a good run blocker at times. They don't have another solid right tackle on their roster. They really need Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah, so, they do. They do need. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's going to be pivotal to winning this year. Mike McGlinchey is as important as any, really.
Miguel Santana says, I'm going to smash my head on a glass beer if D Ford is on this team this season. Trey is going to be a beast. I'll use Jimmy Stand Square. TF up. Wow. Miguel has had
Here's what's
enough.
going to happen. You're going to do that, but then he's going to get a sack and a half in week 1 and limited, maybe 25 snaps or so. We're all going to get excited. And then Thursday, we're going to learn he has a back problem and is out indefinitely again. That's the D Ford cycle.
All right. C. Turley says, hey, y'all never addressed the Seattle trade possibility. Does it happen? Why or why not? I say no, because it's an arch nemesis. Again, the Niners would have to probably pay the entire salary. Hey, we're paying, and maybe they would. But the thing is, we're going to pay Jimmy Garoppolo to play for you, Seattle, but you have to play him when we play you. That's the stipulation. You can't play Geno Smith because we want to play Jimmy. We think Jimmy gives us a better chance to win.
Yeah.
Fred Warner knows his tendencies.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that was a really good show. So many donations, people getting back in the spirit. It's time. It's football season. We made it through the lean times, and those lean times are a little scary for content creators, especially if it's your entire job. But we did it.
Yeah,
and we're back.
We did. We have one more show technically before training camp officially starts. Yeah. One more show because we go on Wednesdays and training camp officially starts Thursday for the 49ers. But we've essentially made it, Grant. Kudos to you, man. Kudos being a full-time guy. This is tough.
Kudos to us. This was fun. Thanks for watching, everyone. 900 people. It's feeling like football season. This was great. See you guys bright and early tomorrow with Croc. See you guys then.